Almost certainly, mate. Don't worry about it. I've got that covered. And
is the bar open yet?
Yes, it's swim.
Well, that's later.
Hello and welcome to episode 114 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is the marketing and the F is the whatever you decided. You're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I picked up a thing or two over my 25-year career from techie to CMO and trusted advisor, and each week I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, and hopefully share with you some marketing street knowledge that will inspire the rockstar CMO in you. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode is recorded on Friday the 13th of May. I hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week, Jeff Clark and I take a dip into the Rockstar CMO swimming pool. My guest is Laurie Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications, and I wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing talk. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment. Jeff Clark is a sought-after marketing strategy advisor and former Serious Decisions Forrester Research Director. And this week, in what we're planning to be a monthly feature, we're taking a look at what my guests have chucked into our portal to hell for all that's wrong in marketing, Rockstar CMO swimming pool. Welcome back, Jeff. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm jolly good. I didn't do the full welcome back, Jeff, to Rockstar CMO FM.
Well, I know where I am, so you don't have to tell me.
I need the script or something. Or maybe if I did this more than, I don't know, what is it, 134 times, I might have got the hang of it by now. Yep. Well, here we go. So Jeff, I think as the weather is getting warmer, will you agree? I mean, we always do.
Definitely, it is. We're breaking 80 in Fahrenheit degrees here in Massachusetts, so it's definitely getting warmer.
Lovely, yeah. And we've had a lovely couple of weeks here in the UK as well. So as the weather is getting warmer, I thought we'd take a dip into the Rockstar CMO swimming pool, our portal to hell for all the bullshit, snake oil, and overhyped trends of this industry we love.
Are the groupies down there?
Yeah, almost certainly, mate. Don't worry about it. I've got that covered. And
is the bar open yet?
Yes, swim
that's
bar.
later. Okay.
And I wouldn't swim in it because people keep chucking things in there. So and as we're, the weather's good and we're rock stars, and as you know, every week when I talk to our guests and sometimes we chuck something in there. But I thought maybe we should have a look and see if anything our rock stars have chucked in needs to be rescued. What do you think, mate?
I think that is a wonderful idea.
Yeah, and seeing as I've just read out a great long thing about it, it's a good job you do as well. that didn't come across as rehearsed in any way whatsoever. It's all off the cuff. All right, mate. So I looked back over a number of options we've had over the last 10 or so episodes, from the Hollywood sign that Matthew would get chucked in, I think, the week before last. In fact, you threw Simon Daniels in last week. So
that's right.
We've also had generation labels from Joe Jansen. We've had Tim Hines complain that marketing is always in crisis mode. Jill Ransom talked about age-old shit, typical marketing emails. Right, we're going to write an ebook, we're going to have people download it, and we're going to get our content, get names, which is the longest thing I think we've chucked in the pool before. And Kathy not wanting to measure the number of pieces of content we create. And then one that came up twice,
Yes.
account-based marketing.
ABM.
Both your former esteemed colleague Kerry Cunningham and Chris Lynch, CMO of Mindtickle, both nominated. So I've come to that one at the end, thinking that perhaps that might be where we should start. What do you think?
I think that's it's it's worth considering whether to pull it out of the pool, or leave it in. And I think there's two sides to this to me this issue or this name of ABM. And I mean, I have to say, this is one of those things where I always get irritated at 3-letter acronyms, because it's like ABM. I mean, that depending on, who you are and where you come from or what industry you've been in, it means many different things like anti-ballistic missiles, or in our case, account-based marketing.
Yeah.
And I think, Carrie, I mean, this is one of the things that we used to talk about all the time when we worked together at Serious Decisions and Forrester, was that it's like, well, I mean, we've always been marketing to accounts. Don't tell anybody this, but that's in business to business marketing. We are always marketing to accounts, and yes, we're marketing people, but those people live in accounts and they buy from accounts. So it's kind of like to say, it's time we think about marketing to accounts is like saying, I just realized that, when I eat, I need to be thinking about consuming proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Wow. I didn't realize that. And I think, one of the things that got in the way, which actually was one of the things that I would largely hold Serious Decisions responsible for, was this whole idea of the lead and this, the funnel of you've got your marketing interaction, then you get your lead, then it's a MQL, it's an SQL, it's a da, and it's going to go down and through a linear fashion and down a funnel. Not that funnels is necessarily a wrong way to look at things, but and the reason why I threw leads in is that it's like, the concept got it wrong in that it's like, we're looking at that one interaction, and what are we going to do as we follow that one interaction, where we know in business to business buying, it's you very rarely have a single individual buying. You might have a single individual who's championing with a boss who's got to okay it. More often than not, the majority of the time, you've got multiple individuals, maybe sometimes multiple departments or buying groups, who are making these decisions. And so that really forces you to step back and think about the funnel in a broader context. And when if you're as you're setting up your planning for the next year or multiple years and stuff like that, you want to be thinking about your total addressable market and who are the accounts in the total addressable or total serviceable market, because that's the tippy top of the funnel. And so as you look about at the accounts as they work their way down through the funnel to actually to a sale or win, is that you've got multiple. You're trying to be tracking the multiple interactions and engagements you have with people at that account that are all influencing that final decision.
Yeah, so this is also part of that argument about that we need to be focused on opportunities rather than individuals, right? And the fact that and some of this comes through marketing automation, doesn't it? And the behavior marketing automation drives, which is that you focus on individuals rather than on accounts. And I know that in my past, in my CMO gig when I was at SendShare, is we were struggling to reconcile the data. I'm not going to talk about which vendors they were, but our marketing automation solution, its whole data structure was around individuals, and
Correct.
Our CRM solution was built around accounts. And so therefore we're trying to make that reconciliation, because as you say, sales are going to think about it as accounts, aren't they? So it's this whole thing.
It is. It's one of those fundamental mismatches that you wonder why it wasn't thought of before. As a matter of fact, and of course, a lot of marketing automation, market resource management did sort of like gravitate from the consumer business business to consumer over into business to business. But you hit the nail on the head with the fact that it's like, not only does a marketing automation platform look at individual contacts and didn't have very good capabilities for grouping those contacts and accounts until more recently, but also looks at everything tactically. Every campaign is a single tactic, and so you're not even thinking about the breadth of tactics that you are running against. Running is a bad word to use for that, but the multiple tactics that you're using to try to engage people from those accounts, and so a lot of the issue that was created was tech driven, and I think one of the things, as I said, serious decisions. I mean, that's where I kind of learned the whole lead management process, and how we automated it at a couple of companies that I worked at is along their guidance, and we were using the tools that we had to do this. And then when all of a sudden when ABM tools came along, that was tech driven, because all of a sudden now there's technology that lets us identify the people from accounts that hit our website, account identification. There's technology that identifies, when those accounts are active at third-party sites, like with intent monitoring. And then there's ways to collate, engagement from target accounts, into, the accounts or the buying groups. So using marketing attribution tools. So it's like all of those, tech companies, they jumped on the ABM bandwagon because it's like, it's looking at it as if it's new, but it's really the technology that's enabling you to look at it the way you would have been looking at it prior.
Yeah. And some beautiful bird song in the background there, Jeff. Very nice. What did the? But
I let them into the house. Sorry.
Does that suggest that ABM is a technology category that's then ignited this ABM conversation around marketers? Because I don't really get it, because for me, I'm a big advocate of the fact that ABM should stay in the fucking swimming pool, to be honest with you, because it's a bullshit term, because it's like digital marketing now. No, really, you shouldn't be talking about digital marketing. It's just marketing.
Yes.
Account-based marketing in B2B is exactly how you should be working. It's just, as you say, it's created a technology category which has helped drive marketers' behavior, which suggests we're slaves to the technology.
Yeah, to me, it was a short-lived buzzword term that has lost its for one, it's lost its cachet because we've been talking about it for so long. It's not new anymore, but again, you're right. I mean, ABM itself, in terms of account-based marketing, is nothing new. It is, the tools are new, but the tools, you should be thinking about them, by virtue of what they do, like with intent monitoring or marketing attribution. These are all pieces of a puzzle for your demand marketing, no matter what your demand, no matter what you're doing from a strategy perspective.
Absolutely. And I think when you were talking about the technology that's available now that can show, where we talk about personalization and tracking individuals and all that kind of stuff, just knowing the accounts that come on your website is incredibly insightful, isn't it, in terms of that? And that's really what you're interested in, isn't it? Is that some people from a particular target account are interested and are now coming on your website. So therefore, that should trigger some activity.
And I remember I was at Pegasystems when Demand Base came out with kind of like, as I remember, kind of the first foray into being able to do this. And Pegasus had a very disciplined target account approach to selling and marketing. And it's like, we knew every bank that we were trying to market to. We knew, and that was by country. And so every market we sold into in every country was like, we had identified who we were going to be approaching. And that, to me, that's incredibly freeing, because it says, I'm not out there looking at the whole universe. And I may have quoted before, I know, or the guy who was running the business in France said, I'm not after all the banks in France. I'm after 3 banks. There's 3 accounts, and they're big. So any business I do, is going to deliver for us. And one of the things I know when ABM started to become a term, because I remembered back to in roughly the 2003, 2004 timeframe. I was at another company, I was at Progress, and I was in charge of doing the marketing for a target account segment, and there was like 10 reps in several countries. And again, we had kind of identified 300 accounts, so again, very manageable. And it's like, so what do we do? It's like there's only so many things we can do. So we're going to do account research, we're going to do buyer mapping, we're going to do very targeted direct marketing. We're going to do relationship events where we can engage with these people, one-on-one, and that's about it. And which is the interesting thing is, as the ABM tools came along, it's like, oh, now there's a lot more we can do. I mean, it kind of rests on the same very tight focus, but there's a lot more we can do to both engage and track the engagement of all the different buyers within those target accounts.
Right. So we're just saying that it's just B2B best practice that was around before the actual tools were, but the tools have helped us do this better. And I think that's really, and I also think it's really interesting, because if you look at you were talking about targeted marketing. If you look at I was working with an agency once, and they were talking about working with a different client, and they ran a LinkedIn campaign just focused on one target account, right? Because when you get into this mindset of ABM, of proper ABM, you can do that, right? Because you know exactly who you're going after, and something like LinkedIn is incredibly good for that. So that's it's really interesting.
The biggest struggle to me was always that sales and marketing was on the same page regarding that set of accounts. So like when I was at Pega, there was a different group, a corporate strategy group that decided what the accounts were, and that basically everybody had sales and marketing had to say, okay, these are the ones we're working with. And sometimes if you leave it to the sales team to create who the accounts are, then it's like, well, we're going to go after this 10. Oh, by the way, these 5 fall off because we don't like them, so we're going to add people, which becomes which is fine for them, but it makes it tough for marketing, because then you've got a moving bubble, if you will, that's very hard to get your arms around.
And also, from a marketing perspective, we're often encouraged or looking at having that top of funnel as wide as we possibly can, right? Often that's talked about around B2B writing is it's so generic, because we're trying to not offend anybody and capture as many people in there. But if you can then take this very highly targeted account approach, really understand who your customer is and who you're going after, that really helps you when you're creating this content and creating a story around, who you're not trying to appeal to, right?
Right.
But it makes a much better content and much better marketing, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, I'm split then. So are we leaving ABM to its?
We're taking. I think the thing was the term we threw it, because again, account-based marketing is marketing in the business-to-business world. Right. So it's the term we're throwing in, and it's the technology and the best practices that we'll pull out.
Right, I love it. So
maybe because there's multiple people on an account, there's different things we can throw back in and things that we'll pull out. How's that?
Yeah, it sounds good. And I think people should let us know. What do they think? Do they think that ABM should stay in the pool or should come out? The other thing is I just want to point out that if people want to listen to Kerry Cunningham talking about it, or Chris Lynch, that was episode 105 and episode 102, which I'll include a link to in the show notes. So that leaves me with one more agenda item. We've done the weather. The weather's nice. We've gone to the pool. What are we listening to when we're rescuing these things, Jeff?
We're listening to a tune called Head Above Water, which is appropriate for people drowning in the pool. Avril Lavigne from 2019.
It seems with our mixed view of ABM at this point, it's barely got its head above water, but it seems that it's
I think I was thinking more of our listeners than the acronym, because as she says, I gotta keep the calm before the storm. I don't want less. I don't want more. I just want to focus on my accounts. Yeah, wait, she didn't put that last part in, but
but then if she was in B2B sales, almost
that's exactly what she was
thinking. Yes, I love it, Jeff. Thank you very much, mate. And Will I see you next week?
We'll be back. Yes.
Excellent. I look forward to it. Cheers, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I've gotta keep the calm before the storm. I don't want less, I don't want more. Must bar the windows and the doors to keep me safe, to keep me warm. Yeah, my life is what I'm fighting for. Can't part the sea, can't reach the shore. And my voice becomes the driving force. I won't let this pull me overboard. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown.
Thank you, Jeff. And that was Head Above Water by Avril Lavigne from 2019. And as I mentioned, we'll be dipping into the swimming pool once a month and asking for your votes. And in the meantime, if you have any feedback or suggestions, we'd love to hear them. We are Rockstar CMO on the socials, or drop us an email at hello@rockstarcmo.com. Right, on to my guest. Laurie Jones, the President and CEO of Avocet Communications, has more than 25 years of experience in all aspects of marketing, advertising, PR and social media, bringing her strong understanding of today's consumer and the marketplace, and an attitude of resisting business as usual thinking to local and well-known brands. It was fun chatting to Laurie. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hi Laurie, welcome to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And so for people that don't know you, Laurie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am president and CEO of a great agency in the Denver area by the name of Avocet Communications. We've been in business for 42 years. I've been with the agency for 32 years, and I live and breathe agency life and marketing trends, and 4 kids, a great husband, and a great dog that's weighs about as much as I do.
That's fantastic. So you're chatting to us from Denver right now.
I sure am, in the very, very sunny city with snow-capped mountains right behind me. It's a gorgeous day.
Lovely. Well, anybody who listens to this podcast knows that we're obsessed with the weather, so that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So Avocet Communications, what do you focus on? Is it PR, or are you more broader than that?
We are broader. We're an integrated communications firm, so we do focus on first strategy. We are a strategy first firm. We don't work with many brands where we are not deploying, a 60, 90-day strategy session. And then we integrate after that through owned, earned, shared, and paid approaches.
Nice. And your company was founded by your father, I believe, having listened to you on other podcasts.
I know. It was. So my father founded the agency in 1980. And he, at the time, was very involved in trade show exhibitry and traveled the world of very, very large enterprise clients, and was tired of not being home during the week and only on the weekends with the family. So he left that partnership and started Avocet, which was a one-man shop out of the basement of my parents' home. For many years, I graduated college in 1989 with a broadcast journalism degree, asking myself, what in the world am I going to do with this?
Yes.
A long story short, very soon after my graduation, I was interning for a professor of mine. The professor asked my father to do a project. During that project, my father and I were having lunch, and he sat me down and said, why don't we do this together? Yeah. And so the history with the two of us, great partnership, started then and there.
Nice. Because normally, I ask marketers, what inspired you to get into marketing? But it's the family business that's got you into it, right?
The inspiration for me was, what am I going to do next? And I grew to love it and love this partnership so much with my father. It was truly the gift that I never saw coming.
Wow. And you didn't study marketing at university then? This came to you through your work?
It did. It was very organic. My granddad was also in marketing. He had a trade show exhibit company in Chicago. We're definitely an arts sort of family.
Yeah.
And my uncle was with a firm in Chicago as well. And so I grew up with it. It was very innate. My father even took one child to a trade show. There are 4 siblings in my family as well. And so I feel like I grew up on the trade show floor and these deep discussions. And then, saying no to what I thought was going to be my passion in my career, broadcast journalism, and then having this opportunity present itself. It's funny. People often say, you've never really been through an interview, have you? And I said, well, there's 2 types of interviews. I mean, there's an interview for a job, and mine lasted 18 years. And then there is, clients, of course, interview us day in and day out. So I totally disagree with what you just said.
I was actually going to disagree with that statement, knowing what it's like to run an agency. You're being interviewed all of the time.
Constantly.
Absolutely.
And dare I even add, our own team members, our own employees, right? They're constantly, it's constant.
Yeah. But it's an interesting question to ask you because I guess because you're incredibly rare in having that one company career, aren't you? That you've been doing the same thing for all this time. So what drives you along for doing the same thing for all this time?
It started out as just this passion to be with my father day in and day out. And, he was my best friend and we had so much fun together. And there was so much energy. He was an incredible, incredible human being and just loved people. And so much of my passion, I gained through him. And he was so wise. And, so learning the industry, I truly attribute to him. And this thirst to always want to learn, I really, I was captivating just listening to him. And, it just grew from there. And, we became very close. And it is one career because I love what I do.
Yeah.
If I did not love what I do, then I would not be doing this.
Yeah. So you're still in love with running this agency. And by the way, where does the name Avocet come from?
Well, that's very interesting because the same professor I mentioned earlier in the show, we had a thesis paper, and the thesis paper that I wrote was about the naming of the agency. And prior to that, it was simply Sartorius Advertising. And my dad did not want to sound like another agency or a legal firm or an accounting firm. Yeah. So he gave me a list of many names one day, and Avocet was on that list. And I just pointed to it and I said, this is it. Starts with an A. I love the AV, vernacular. It sounds beautiful. It rolls off the tongue. And it's just, a beautiful, beautiful word. It happened to be his favorite shorebird. And here we are, 42 years later.
I like it. And it sounds like it's got momentum, doesn't it? Avocet.
It does.
It sounds like it does something,
Thank
it's a
you
rocket
for that.
or something like that. Yeah. So over all this time, you must have seen changes both in terms of the kind of work you do as an agency but the role also and the relationship that you have. The obvious one will be obviously channels and technology have changed a great deal in that time. But what have you seen in terms of the value agencies can offer clients that's changed over this period of time? Or is it the same? What do you think?
Well, there's certainly adapting to change, but there's also setting trends to cause change, right? And I would like to believe that we are one of those agencies that has truly been trend setting. And if we take a look at the critical junctures of telephone, TV, computer, laptop, mobile phone, and how they have changed the way products and services go to market, it truly is, an amazing juxtaposition over time. And I love the fact that, if we started out as an ad agency only doing advertising, and then we picked, and only B2B, by the way. Then we picked up a large statewide consumer program. And so we quickly had to adapt between them. Not a lot of adaptation, really, but, we became more integrated. And then, years later, we had a client let me know that they had, a PR situation happened and we needed you to handle this PR situation. So guess what? we had a PR firm. So that's ultimately how we integrated the services that we offer and grew over time. And it's been, truly an amazing journey, thinking back to, we were the first agency in the state of Colorado to give a seminar on this thing called the World Wide Web. And we introduced a concept called email at the time as well.
Yeah.
And so, are you setting trends, or is technology setting trends for you? I think there's probably a healthy juxtaposition between the two. But certainly that agency relationship and providing value is making certain that you are leading the client down a path that they can be incredibly successful through and revenue generating.
Right. So you've actually, especially with your background, your education, you've gone from sort of that broadcast type of media and that kind of selling and marketing to, the new social selling. What do you think's changed in the way that you now work with clients around that stuff? Because you said that you started off as a brand agency, so presumably there was a lot of broadcast and there was a lot of out of home and stuff like that going on. How have you shifted, and what skills have you needed to develop over that time?
I think it's always, and this has been a skill from day one, but I think we adapt more deeply now to client need, meaning our clients' customers' need. So how are we getting people to the buyer table? It's fragmented because we've got so many screen-to-screen tools, print, direct mail, just so fragmented tactically. So what is it that we can do to build that awareness, to build that insight, intrigue, excitement, and get them want to learn more about a product? And certainly social selling, strategic social is a part of that, and a very, very important part. Is it based on the product lifespan or the service lifespan at a company? Is it more top of funnel, or is it mid funnel, or do we close the deal with it? Those are the key things that we try to hone in and figure out with our clients is, what part of the funnel is needed with this sort of a tool. And it must be a part of every program, period.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, you can lead with it, but a lot of people don't have the luxury of brand awareness, and they need more top of funnel awareness building ultimately to drive people through. But it is very strategic. You do need to test and scale. You do need to adapt. You've got to throw a lot at it to begin with, through the different modes of which social selling can take place, whether it be something similar to this podcast, a video cast, a solo cast, a blog. What is your hub to the spoke in which you're going to develop that content through?
Yeah. And I'll take you back. Just a question. I was just thinking about something else you said. The fact that your agency has grown these different disciplines, right, through the trust of your customers. You said, we had a client and they had a PR problem, so we developed this PR. I think that's really interesting in the way that agencies evolve, isn't it? Is you build trust with customers and then they let you build out these capabilities.
Well, it's pivot, right? So when you've got a great customer relationship, you constantly have to pivot based on their need. It's interesting. I had a team member once say, "Lori, we don't do that." And I said, "Oh, yes, we do."
Yeah.
And then, she only lasted for another few months because I'm constantly, those agencies that weren't setting trend or adapting are out of business today. Yeah. And we are here 42 years strong because of the mindset that we have as a leadership team. And yes, we are constantly pivoting, constantly adapting because the market around us, the client need, the customer need is constantly there. And I want people who can think on their feet and solve problems, not say, we don't do that.
Yeah. And I think that reflects also a good marketer because, often on this show, actually, we talk about things like marketing education and whether people should get a formal marketing education or should they learn on the job. I think that clearly from what you've just been saying there as well is that you need to be a lifelong learner as a marketer, don't you? You need to stay on top of all these things, particularly if you're running an agency.
I'll never forget my father and I were leaving a meeting with Coors very early in my career. And we got into the car and I just said, you're so smart. You've got so much wisdom and you're an expert at what you do. And I can't wait until I get to that point. And he said, Lori, I'm not an expert because I'm constantly learning.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that conversation. And it is the mantra by which I, as a leader, truly live by.
Yeah.
I am constantly learning, and from making mistakes too. That
Yes.
is par for course here. And that to me was a real gift that I received from my father very early on, was that mindset.
Well, I mean, and that's the nature of marketing, isn't it? I mean, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not, you're not testing enough, because, we are basically an industry of hedging, aren't we? Hedging our investments. Some things are going to work, some things aren't going to work, but you've got to fail fast, learn from that and move on, because you can't just stick to the same old thing that you've done all of the time, sitting on your little hamster wheel. You have to try these new things.
I agree. And technology has really provided that opportunity for us, right? If we take a look, at the Mad Men age and eras, there wasn't a lot of fast happening, right?
Yeah.
And testing and scaling took, an eternity.
Yeah.
So to be in that position now where we can adapt and quickly, test and scale. And know what paths we need to be optimizing and those that we need to be pushing aside is an incredible opportunity for all brands out there.
Yeah, and over your career with this agency and with working with clients, have you seen a change in the way that that relationship works, or is that still the same? I mean, from my perspective, I've seen the whole range, right? I've seen really good client agency relationships with a great brief and a really tight relationship. And I've seen, it not be so good. So what have you seen? Have you seen that change over time, or is it exactly the same as it's always been?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Thank you for that, because I think it's all about the right client agency relationship. And some CMOs are better off maintaining deep control, and that's a positive word, by the way, over an in-house team. And if they've got a great strategist on the team, or two or three, or they hire agencies just for strategy, then implementing programs, these are large enterprise brands, is where this makes sense, right? Implementing programs, I think, can work very, very well. At the same token, there are a lot of great CMOs out there that really rely on their agency partnerships based on, a swim lane that they feel they might be very successful in. And it becomes more cost effective for them because they've got 10 PR professionals within a PR agency instead of being able to afford 1 or 2 or 3 FTEs. Yeah. So I, of course, feel that outsourcing is the right thing to do because you do have more of that expertise on the table. And certainly for small to medium-sized businesses, those SMBs, it's so difficult to gain. Most of them can't hire a true CMO, right?
Absolutely.
And it's so difficult to build that expertise, with those size businesses.
Absolutely. And I think that particularly with some skills like PPC, SEO, and those kind of things, or PR, where you've got to build those relationships, you need the experts, right? You can't do that yourself. And if you do try and in-house it, you're getting the limited experience of your own business and their experience within your own business. Whereas when you work with an agency, they're working with 20 other clients, and they're seeing things happening in your market that you may not be able to see until they hit you.
I agree. And I think it's because those individuals get too close to what they do day in and day out.
Absolutely.
And it whitewashes the approach that they may take, and they've got their blinders on.
Yeah. I'm a big fan working with agencies. There is a flip side. I've worked with CMOs that completely outsource everything to agencies, including my phrase is their marketing brain. So they've lost their creativity and their drive, and probably you can't articulate what they're trying to get done from a creative perspective because they've outsourced everything. But I think there's a balance there. But I think a good agency. This is a nice ad for agencies and for Avastin.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'm a big fan. But okay, so I better crack on with my questions, the other questions as well. I understand that. You can't I mean, really, hopefully one day we won't mention COVID in the way that we all work, but clearly there is a big change in the way that we work. And I think that's particularly impacted the marketing industry and agencies. So what changes have you seen, and how has that affected you? Are you guys now a remote agency, or you still got a bunch of people in the office?
Well, it's hybrid for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And, pre-COVID, we tried remote working a couple times and it failed fast because the team members, abused the luxury that it afforded. I don't see that happening at all anymore, but I also believe it took, a crisis to create better synergy remotely for people, because they were just thirsty for human interaction during that time as well. So I feel businesses during that time really perfected how successful remote working can be, and the accountability that is needed to create success. So yes, we have a hybrid team worldwide, quite frankly. And those of us who come to the office each day just need that human touch, that interaction, that creativity, that ability to spark innovation through seeing more nonverbals with someone instead of just the shoulder up or waist up. And I do think that is going to be a very, very important thing that companies will miss years downstream. And dare I say, team members and people in general as well. That human touch, I think, is very, very important. It worked very well for the agency, which is why we've kept it in place. We've been able to hire stronger people by not, insisting that they, number one, be in the agency, or number two, live near the agency. So, our team now globally has been perfected through that. And the other thing I might add is we've adapted to change. So we've adapted to, for instance, mothers who don't want to work a full-time job anymore, but they still want to dip their toe. So we might hire through this gig worker campaign that we've got going on right now, which we've hired many people through because we're adapting to what they want. We might hire a team member for 12 hours or 15 hours a week just to work on a single account. Whereas in the past, we would say it's a 40 or 50 hour a week job and you're going to be assigned these three accounts. Why not just hire 3 people for it now and let them work, 10, 15 hours a week? So meeting people where they are and what they want to maintain their own lifestyle, I think, is a very important piece of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spent a time with one of the McCann agencies, and it's only a few years ago, so it's in modern times. They insisted that everybody was in the office between 9 and 5:30 in London, and that doesn't work for everybody. And you also end up with a group of people in the office who are adapted to that. You have that one monoculture mindset of the metropolitan folks that can live near the office and can do that, and you lose out on so much talent and diverse thinking, don't you?
I agree. And I will say it's interesting. The generational side of this is very interesting because, typically, the individuals with 20 plus years are those that want to be in the office. They need that human interaction, and those that are newer to the team don't necessarily need it. Or they need it in a different way. A Zoom camera is absolutely fine for them to get their fix. And so companies, need to consider that as well.
Well, yeah. And I think that, if you do things like Myers-Briggs test, there are people that get energy from other people, right? And it's harder to get that energy from a Zoom call. And plus, with Zoom calls, we tend to not do the trivial stuff of getting coffee together and stuff like that. It's just, bam, meeting starts, agenda starts, off you go.
It's not as fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm just realizing the time, Laurie. I'm very much enjoying the conversation. I'm going to move on to our last question, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
We have a regular feature on the Rockstar CMO called The Swimming Pool, our portal to hell for all the BS, snake oil, and overhyped trends. Basically, all that's wrong with this marketing craft that we clearly love. What would you throw into our pool?
Yeah, I would say that it is brands believing that a digital advertising approach is going to solve all their problems. And everyone believes that it's digital first. And digital is so much more than that. And if you don't have an awareness, it's pretty impossible to make that happen. And there are ways in which you can go about building awareness and building a database, if we just say B2B tech here for a second, or, dare I say consumer or retail, our traditional means by advertising that must be deployed in order to build top of mind awareness and ultimately be able to move people through the funnel and establish preference. There are very few digital first outside of enterprise, very well-known companies that works well for brands today.
Yeah, no, I like that. And also from the conversation we were having just now, it sounds to me like the approach you take with your clients, because I was trying to sort of little pin you down on some of the changes that have happened about channels and technology, is things are appropriate at certain points in the life cycle of a customer, right? And are appropriate for different audiences. I mean, one of my regular guests, Jeff Clark, he talks about how, there's no point in doing sponsored tweets or Google ads for a CEO that never reads them, right? So
I know.
You need to appeal to those guys in the way that you've always done. So I think that's an excellent addition to our Rockstar CMO swimming pool. Thank you very much, Laurie. And
Thank you.
When people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
They can reach me on Twitter at Laurie Jones, and Laurie at Avocet, AVOCET, communications.com. Fire away.
Splendid. I'll include all your links in the show notes, and I very much look forward to speaking to you again, Laurie. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laurie, and I'll include all her links in the show notes and also to her podcast, Integrate and Ignite, on which she was kind enough to have me as a guest recently. You can also find that by searching Integrate and Ignite on your podcasting jukebox. Right, it's Friday evening. Time to wind down the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and find my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome. Welcome to the bar. It's noisy here tonight. As I walked in, I swore, you've got some sort of like space program going off there in the corner. Is that? I mean, I see a spaceman with a rocket ship, and is that a flying saucer? What is going on over there? You've got some
alien
sort
invasion.
Yeah, it's some sort of Star Trek-y sort of space thing happening over there in the corner. I wonder where you'll find all these like space sounds to really fulfill the whole thing. Anyway,
I wonder as well. I mean,
we will sally forth among the din of space noises. I have something in fun for us tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I have now this drink that we're going to drink tonight. It has, there is a bit of a baggage that it carries. It is considered one of those sort of, drinks that manly men don't drink. However, which is completely sexist.
Yes, can't say that.
But I find, and I love this drink, and I find that it's just as prevalent among men, women, anyone really. And that is a Cosmopolitan. And so I make a Cosmopolitan a little differently than is classic. And so, and it probably the part that I alter won't be surprising to anybody who's listened to this show more than a few times, which is the sugar, the lack of sugar that I put into it. So basically, we start with our lovely vodka, because of course that's where we start with a Cosmopolitan is vodka, and then I put in 100% cranberry juice, not the sweetened stuff, so unsweetened. Cranberry juice. And so mostly you'd find that the Cosmopolitan is going to be very sweet and very, and sweetened by the cranberry juice itself. But then it has so much sugar in it. And the interesting thing is I find that when you put in the unsweetened juice, you get a much deeper color. And so what ends up happening is when you mix it with the vodka, you get a much deeper, brighter sort of more vibrant colored, and so the drink is much more beautiful actually than it normally is. I mean, I love pink, so I'm a big pink fan. So then, if you want to sweeten it, you can put a number of things into it, including things like honey, if that's your preference. I actually like it with just the unsweetened cranberry juice and the vodka, and that's really all it is. It's a very simple drink to make, and so maybe a little lemon twist or something like that.
Nice.
if you're into that. But then we'll take our big bright pink drinks and have a discussion.
Splendid. Well, I've got to tell you that I was once accused of drinking a girly drink, and and I'm going to attempt to make your Cosmo with the ingredients on my desktop bar, and I should end up with something that was once described as a girly drink to me. So anyway, I'm going to put some ice in my glass. Did you put ice in yours? Yeah.
No, this is one of those ones where you want to shake it and shake it all up over ice and then pour it into a martini glass of some kind so that you get the ultra fanciness to it.
Yeah, I've never had a Cosmo. I was familiar with them, but I didn't know what went in them, so I've learned something this evening. I'm obviously going to go with the Hendrick's gin rather than the vodka, which is, I think, a decent substitute. And then cranberry juice, you say.
The most English of vodkas, right? I mean, as you move further west in Europe, I find that the vodka turns into gin.
And I'm gonna put in there the cranberry isn't really something we grow on these shores so much. We're more into cucumbers, so I'm going to put in some, which is the most English of cranberries. So I'm going to put in some cucumber tonic water into this.
I see.
To make my Cosmo.
I see.
And it's in a straight glass. It's not in a fancy cocktail glass either. Let me give this a taste. I'll give my girly drink a taste. That's delicious, Robert. Very nice.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And nobody's ever described me as a manly man, and I'm happy to drink the girly drinks. So that's absolutely delicious. So we're drinking these wonderful pink drinks. Mine isn't terribly pink, but imagine we are. Oh, and by the way, I could drink these every week. Where are we going to go with these?
Well, I thought we'd have to go to, so since we're drinking very fancy drinks, I think we have to go to a very fancy place, which of course means we're going to France. And I think we need to take advantage of the weather, and we need to get somewhere on the coast of France. I'm not exactly sure where. And I wish I was more familiar with the French coast than I am. But somewhere in the south of France, somewhere where there is somewhere where we can sit in a warm place, drink our most fancy of drinks in the most fancy of places. And I'm not sure where that would be. You might know better than me, but it feels like that's where we need to be. Maybe somewhere down near Bordeaux or somewhere near Cont or somewhere.
Exactly.
Somewhere
I think if you are over in Europe and we're drinking these fancy drinks, it has to be Cont or Monaco or somewhere super fancy.
Yes, that feels like it, right?
Yeah, let's push the boat out. And we're sitting, sipping, watching all the beautiful people with our beautiful drinks. What does conversation turn to once we've decided where we are?
Well, there's an interesting thing. So, and you're going to appreciate this conversation, I think, a lot, because I know you appreciate classic cars. Yes. And you actually have a classic car.
Yes.
And drive it occasionally, I see, on social media. Probably not as much as you would like. But, so there's an interesting debate that happens among content marketers. And if you want to start a fight with content marketers, ask whether or not you should include the date of publication on your post.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
And so if you ask 4 content marketers whether you should include the date, you'll get 5 answers back, right? Because yes, one of them will have 2 more opinions, right? Now there's arguments on both sides of this, right? There is the argument who say, well, you can't correctly cite any content that's not properly dated.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally get that argument. And then there's also the side that says, well, if I include a date, that makes the content seem old even when it's not, and can possibly cause people to move away from it, even though the content is evergreen. But here's the thing. I think it's the wrong question. Because, I can see both sides of the SEO argument and all those kinds of things. But the thing is, a timeless piece of content doesn't automatically mean it's going to stand the test of time. And in other words, it's not going to become classic just because you don't put a date on it. And by the way, content that stands the test of time, that is classic, isn't necessarily timeless. In other words, it may have overt references to things that are within the actual context of the time that it was written in.
Yeah.
And, so when we write, when we're thinking about creating content that will become classic or that is evergreen, one of the things that we immediately do is we start trying to avoid doing anything that would link the piece to the time that it was written in, right? So we stay away from pop culture references or news references or time-based references in order to make the piece evergreen. But honestly, that's an impossible task. You can't do that. You cannot know a priori what you're going to put into your content because you have no idea what details in the future is going to make that seem dated, and there are
also
so many.
You're stripping the personality out of the thing, aren't you? If you're not
right.
Place
Exactly.
It,
So basically, when you say, okay, well then, how does anything become classic? In that sort of dictionary definition of a work that is recognized and has established value over time. The answer is because it is. You know what I mean? It's unsatisfying, but it's true that classic things that are classic because they last. And that's it. That's the only reason that they're classic. And there's an author, I love the way he describes this when he says, it's Italo Calvino, when he talks about, about classics, and he says, a classic is a piece that has never exhausted all it has to say to its reader. And I love that because, and what made me think of it was I was just rereading a book, Basic Marketing, a Managerial Approach. Yes, I'm that guy. Written by a guy by the name of Jerome McCarthy back in the 1960s. And you'll not be familiar with the book, but you'll totally be familiar with the theme of the book, which had introduced this concept, which was brand new and innovative and weird at the time, called the 4 Ps, which, of course, if any of you are in marketing, you know the 4 Ps, product, place, price, promotion, and the 4 Ps of marketing. It's a classic marketing book. I've read it now 3 times. Every time I read it, I learn something new. But however, I can tell you, it's so clear that when you read this book that it was written in the 1960s. It's just got all the markings of a 1960s book. But today, you look at a movie like the Lego Movie. Great, wonderful, I would argue a classic movie, despite the fact that most of its characters are topical or pop culture based. I think it will last the test of time because it never really exhausts all it has to say. So when you think about writing a classic piece of content, there are typically 7 ideas that I think are really important because you can't predict and you can't predetermine, but 1, is it memorable? In other words, are you creating something that's truly memorable? 2, do you build a world? Do you build a fully realized setting for your content, B2B or B2C? 3, do you have a distinctive style? In other words, find a style and really stick the landing when you do that style. 4, are you talking about larger truths? In other words, are you illuminating something that's bigger and truthful in the world? 5, are you nodding off to traditions? In other words, are you either trying to pay respect to a tradition that we're escaping from, or are you paying respect to a tradition that is actually there and you want to embrace? And then 6, does it have great structure? And 7, and maybe the most important one, ambiguity. And what I mean by that is that great classic content leaves something for the audience to interpret. It leaves them to find their own way to come either to different conclusions or interpret the work in a way that the author didn't expect. So those 7 pressure points I find that are great for getting to classic content. And again, you can't determine until time happens, because that's the only thing that becomes of a classic. But if you work on those things, I think you have a better shot at creating it.
I love those 7. That's that's I mean, setting out to write a classic is an interesting approach as well, isn't it? Because it's like setting out to be viral or something like that. It's the wrong objective in a way, isn't it? And I completely agree with the argument about putting dates on, because people are obsessed with youth when it comes to content, aren't they? But on the other hand, I mean, there's stuff you've written for sure, I know, and there's stuff that I've written that is absolutely relevant today that people probably don't pay attention to because it's got a date on it. But if you were to refresh that, then it'd be a great piece of content that, I mean, could a classic piece of content just be something that you constantly refresh?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that classic, the classic idea of your classic Thanksgiving turkey. You know what I mean? It's like, or the recipe for this or that piece of content which you constantly go back and revisit and update and those kinds of things. And I think, evolving, I think of, Kotler's book, right? Kotler's textbook on marketing has been updated. I think he's done 19 or 20 different editions at this point, all of which sort of take into account the newest evolutions. And so it's a classic textbook that has been updated and evolved over the last, 50 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I mean, something like marketing, I love the old marketing books, as you know, I've got a few as well, is, okay, so look through the, dated references and some of the language. The lessons are still there, exactly the same as what people are writing now in the new books, right?
Yeah, it's what I find is that so much of what poses as evergreen content these days is just content that, and you said it well, right? It just removes some of the engagement out of it because it's trying to remove some of the topicality out of it so that it feels more timeless. And what I think it does is that you remove some of the things that might make it classic because you're simply trying to make it feel like it wasn't written in a particular time. And I think that's the mistake that we make, is that we feel like you have to remove all of the currentness out of it in order to make it classic and stand the test of time, when actually it's probably the opposite.
Yeah, and when I love this topic. When you write and you put topical references in there, those are the things that connect us as people, right? In our tribe. So if I was to write something and I made a reference to, I don't know, Monty Python or some classic comedy of now, or maybe anything like that, you're connecting with an audience that understands what you're talking about, and you can shortcut what you're saying by making those kinds of references. Now, sure, at some point that defines you as where you stand in the culture and is saying something about your audience, but that's fine, right? You're making that connection.
Yeah, I think it's when you think about it is and you think about it against those sort of 7 pressure points. I think of, for example, great stand-up comedy, right? So stand-up comedy almost always is topical in some way because it's certainly taking advantage of the irony, foibles, weirdness of the day. Yeah. But if you are illuminating larger human traits, and perfect example of this, Jerry Seinfeld is a perfect example of this, right? Yeah. When he's doing his comedy routine and listening to him, it is very topical. It is what he's talking about is very, modern. However, if you go back and watch the stand-up routines from, 20 years ago, well, they still stand up. Forgive the pun, but they still are valuable and funny because what he's doing is he's illuminating human foibles, the sort of the modern challenges that we all have in life. It's just that he's using an example, and so we can still laugh at it because it's still true, right? Yeah. And that's if we when we're because not all content has to be written like this. There is perfect value in writing something that's only going to be valuable for this week or the next month or the next hour even. And so the idea that when we're creating things that we want to last, the idea is to illuminate something that is sort of core to what we're trying to, the value we're trying to deliver, and then trying to do so in a way that it doesn't matter when you consume this, it's still true, right? And that to me is a really, it's a hard thing. It's a challenging thing for sure. But it doesn't have anything to do with pulling out anything that's necessarily topical or not using any current examples or, and by the way, then it doesn't matter if you stick a date on it, right? If you put a date on it at that point, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And it was Seinfeld I was trying to think of when I was saying, when I was going through my examples, perfect example, classic comedy, classic sketches. And if you talk about some of those things, it's a shortcut to an example of what you're trying to think of and the point you're trying to make. That's excellent. And have you written those 7 things down anywhere?
I have indeed. Yes, I just I wrote that for a post on Content Marketing Institute. .com. And so it's there at the moment, and it'll probably make its way to my site on Content Advisory at some point. But it's something that I've been teaching in my classes these days.
Splendid. And that's contentadvisory.net, which is no longer a hovel. It is merely your place on the internet. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, sir?
Well, they'll find me in all the classic channels, which would include these days LinkedIn and Twitter, and I would love to connect with everybody there.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Robert. I'll of course include all your links in the show notes, and more importantly, will you be back here in the bar next week?
I suspect I will. Yes.
Splendid. I look forward to it.
With all the space noises too. We'll see how that goes.
That's just a temporary space festival that we're holding this week. That won't happen ever again.
Right.
Cheers, mate. I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. Good point there about our obsession with content use. So, that's a wrap on episode 114 of the Rockstar CMO Effing Marketing Podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Laurie and Robert for sharing their insight. And also, thanks to friend of the show, Dennis Shaw, for mentioning us in his Content Corner newsletter. I'll include all the guest links and to Dennis and his wonderful newsletter in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. Finally, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know on the socials or drop a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, my lovely regulars Jeff and Robert will be back, and my guest will be Simon Severino, a business strategy advisor and CEO of Strategy Sprints. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll join us back here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.